for me, life sort of before last year, there was no faith, there was no religion. I sort of grew up in a household where, we might attend the old Christingles with school or the odd midnight mass sort of towards Christmas. But other than that, didn't really follow faith, and I didn't really know what it was like to have a relationship with God and to sort of have Jesus in my heart. And so for me to be sat here now talking about that is a massive difference. Like I would never have dreamt of this day in all honesty. And sort of towards the end of 2023, 2024, I'd say is probably when the journey sort of begun. So for me, we was going through some sort of tough times at home. Me and my partner were arguing quite a bit. I changed jobs, and the company that I went into liquidation very quickly. So I'd left quite a stable, safe job to sort of take a risk and try and help people, and then it all went sort of wrong. So financially, we've become quite poor, sort of building debt, and it got to the point where sort of early 2024 we started to need to use the food bank here, and we've got two young children. So for us, it was quite a hard time, quite embarrassing, quite sort of debilitating, sort of just having to use a food bank to try and feed our children, to feed ourselves. And I wouldn't say some nights we didn't eat, but it might just be like beans on toast. I know for some that's more than others, but from where the life we've lived to then was quite a shock, really. And my partner was one that would tend to come here more often than me to collect the food, and Andrew in the food bank actually started, sort of sowing the seeds, as it were. So, kept sort of saying, "I want you to come along to church on a Sunday and see what it's about." And my other half was a bit like, "Nah, it's not for me." She's quite introverted, so for her, like, to step outside that comfort zone, I knew she wouldn't do it. And she sort of said to me about it, and I sort of just laughed it off, like, "Why would we go to church for? It's not really something that we've ever talked about or do." So um, time just went on, and my other half became quite ill, and nobody really knew what was going on. She was losing lots of weight quite quickly, and we were sort of fearing that it was some sort of cancer or something like that. She was, just for unexplained reasons, sort of just dropping weight, and the doctors were doing sort of all sorts of tests and scans and stuff, and nothing was really showing anything. And then sort of February, I remember the date, February the 5th, I'd come off a night shift, and my other half would come home. So again, my other half sort of just looking really pale and bleak and not well. And she said, "Oh, I'm going to go to the doctors today," which for her I knew was sort of a big thing because she's quite stubborn. She doesn't go to the doctors often, even when I'm telling her, like, "You need to go to the doctors," she wouldn't go. And today she sort of said, "I'm going to the doctors." I said, "Oh, okay, do you want me to come?" "No, I'll be fine. I'm going with my mum." I said, "Well, I'll be up for a couple of hours before I go to bed because generally can't unwind straight off a night shift." So yeah, that's that. And I just remember sort of pottering around, and her mum phone was like, "Oh, Shanice's, the doctor's not quite happy with some bits. She wants to go to Shanice. He wants Shanice to go to the hospital." And I was like, "Do you want me to come?" Again, no. And then about an hour later, I received another phone call saying, um, basically, Shanice is not very well and she's been put into resus at Southampton General, um, which for me, I sort of knew that was quite a big thing. So I work in an ambulance, so I sort of know what a resus is, and I knew how like sick that you'd have to be to get there. So I rushed up to the hospital on my bike and sort of just fearing all the worst, like, why is she there? Not really not understanding why she was going there. And when I got there, I saw her for about 2 or 3 minutes. She was quite agitated, quite aggressive. Didn't really know who was what and where and when. And I was sort of taken aside, and we were put in the relatives room. We didn't really know why. And then one of the ITU consultants come in and had a chat with us, and he sat us down and basically said to us that he didn't really know what was going on with her. He knew that she was really, really poorly, and in his honest opinion, he wasn't sure how she was going to survive at this time. She needed an urgent CT scan, but she wouldn't survive the scanning table. So they had no other choice but to tube and sort of put her on life support and be breathing for her. And I just crumbled. I started crying and crying, and he sort of said, like, we're doing everything that we can. We're just not sure what's going on and how we fix what's going on. And he sort of made like I don't know if it was a flippant comment or just, I hadn't really heard it from a doctor before, but he just sort of said like, if you have a faith or if you have anything, time like now would be the time to sort of pray and ask for help, because we're doing everything we can, but we're not really sure what the outcome's going to be. And again, sort of suggested if we had family members local, it might be worthwhile getting them up to the hospital, because the outcome wasn't looking very good. Um, so yeah, I just felt really lost, really helpless. Um, Sort of blubbered a bit for for an hour or two, just not really knowing like what to expect. And we spent sort of a good all afternoon and all night, sort of till about 2 a.m. sort of waiting for her to get put up to ITU and bits like that. And when she was in ITU, we were allowed to go and see her for the first time, obviously in a room with like multiple machines, tubes out of her throat, breathing for her. And we ended up coming home, and I have two young children, and they're sort of fast asleep. And I went in, I sort of gave them both a kiss, and went into my room and just cried for a good couple of hours. And in that time, I sort of prayed. I didn't even know how to pray. I just sort of asked, like, don't let her die. Like, she can't die. We've got two young children of like 6 and 5 at the time, and I couldn't cope without her, and they wouldn't be able to cope without her. And I just, if there was anybody up there, please just like listen. And sort of spent the next sort of 3 to 4 weeks, both here in Southampton. Then she was transferred up to King's in London, um, basically on life support. And it was quite interesting. It's going to sound weird when I say this, but like the doctors didn't really do a great deal in terms of massive interventions. Like, she didn't go for any drastic surgeries or drastic sort of treatments. They basically just kept her heart beating, kept her, kept her body doing what it needed to do. And in about mid-March to early April, they woke her up, and thankfully, there wasn't really any lasting damage other than some sort of hearing loss and some neuropathy pain in her legs from sort of, we're assuming sort of hypoxia or something like that. But there was nothing really, like no major changes, which was like baffling to me. And I didn't really put the two and two together at the time. And I couldn't sit there and think, oh, that must have been me praying. And it wasn't until about a month after, sort of randomly out of the blue, said, I think I'm going to go and give church a try. And I was like, that's a bit strange. She said, what? And I said, well, obviously when you were like under, I prayed. And she said, and she sort of looked at me puzzled. She goes, oh, that is really strange. And I said, well, if you want to go and see what it's like, because I know I'm very impulsive, I'm very like all or nothing. So I'd hate for me to start coming in and like wanting to be involved and her sort of not like it, because then I didn't want it to cause any sort of friction or any changes at home. So I said, you go and see if you like it, and then I'll maybe come in a month's time. And that's sort of what happened. So she spoke to Andrew again at the food bank and sort of said, Andrew, I want to come to church. And he put her in touch with another lady here, and she started coming and sitting at the back. And after about a month, I sort of said to her, are you enjoying it? And she said, yeah, I really enjoy it. It's not what I expected, because it isn't what you expect here. It's not the old, like the traditional church of hymns and stuff. It was, like live music, almost gospel-like, and it was sort of, it just sort of draws you in. And I remember I sort of said to her, right, okay, next week I'm off on Sunday and I'm going to come in. And we had a gentleman doing a guest preach from Sacramento. I think it's Jesus Culture, I think he comes from. And he was doing, he described it as like the hardest and most doom and gloom book on. I remember him sort of talking about not sort of life after the sun, and about how he had family members that had passed and how Christ had sort of helped him. And it sort of like touched me a bit, and like, yeah, this is, this was a bit like us, like that real hopelessness and real sort of being lost. And there was somebody there that sort of was there to help and guide him. So I continued to come, and at first, I'd say for the first few months, I was just sat at the back, just sort of not really singing, not really getting involved, just sat watching and sort of taking everything in. And it wasn't until sort of November time when Janet and Andy did a Explore Church Day, and I said to her, I think we should go, because I know I sort of want to do more, but I don't know how to do more, and maybe the Explore Church would be a really good way to sort of find out. And that was it. That was sort of the start of the real journey for me. I felt like whilst I've been coming, like nothing had really changed and nothing had really happened in my life. But I'd come to explore church, and it was sort of like the catalyst. So from there, sort of Janet put me in touch with Chris about baptism, and it just opened my eyes to what was available, like different communities within the church and the connect groups, and it's just been brilliant. Like it's gone from strength to strength really. From for me at that point, I just started to become more. I don't know if it was just like a welcome or a wake up call. I sort of found a friend at work who goes to a different church, sort of in Basingstoke, and we sort of broached the subject. And she's, oh, I go to church as well. We just started talking about it, and I become more and more sort of aware of what I was enjoying and what I was reading. And I started the Bible book by book, with church, and then I've started it chronologically, so I'm sort of reading it twice, but in different directions. It's just opened my eyes, and I started to become more bolder with faith. So praying with patients that are sort of at end of life, and it's just made me sort of see the world in a different way. And it was sort of why I wanted to continue my sort of journey with faith. And I'd done they said about joining Alpha, which I've now done, and obviously just because of work commitment, it's really hard to commit to a 10-week period, but they've been really sort of open with that. And I've been meeting with Chris about how do I get baptised, and Chris sort of said, look, have a few months, I know you're sort of really keen and stuff, but I really want you to, make sure you're ready to make that commitment and make that pledge. And sort of in my head, I sort of knew, yes, I was, but I sort of was like, in my heart, I sort of knew, yes, I was ready to make that pledge, but I could see why Chris was like, make sure this is for you. And I took some time, continued to study parts of the Bible, or say study parts of it, just sort of listen to it really. It's such a massive book that I don't see how I'm ever going to complete, but I'm sure it will come. But I've just been just religiously sort of following the book and attending church more. And I sort of said to Janet as well, like I really enjoyed helping people and speaking to people about their sort of new journey. So she said, well, would you be interested in sort of coming and helping on the welcome team? And that's what I've done. I sort of was like, went very quickly from doing nothing to talking about baptism, now sort of volunteering on a sort of monthly basis on the welcome team. And as of, like I said, 2nd of March, I was baptised, and it was just like a amazing day for me. And it sort of cemented to me, like it made, like I'm a part of this family now. And I've got brothers and sisters here that sort of, it sounds daft to say it, but like it's not. They're brothers and sisters, they all want the same things. And like it's just refreshing just to see how actually Jesus and God do work within us in different times. And it's just been life changing really. Sort of from then and now, we were dependent on food banks, we were arguing, we were not really communicating that well, to now where we're probably the most financially secure we've ever been. We have a much better relationship, and our children are thriving, which is generally what we want, and everybody wants in life is a happy life. And I'd like to say that we're sort of achieving that, and a part of that, or a massive part of that, is sort of just been opening up and accepting sort of Jesus' love and God's love in our hearts. And we just continue to grow, and I just want to grow more, and I want to do more. So yeah, that's pretty much where we're up to now, really. And to sort of finish today, and to finish my sort of video, one thing that I've been reading, and there was like a verse and a verse in Luke that sort of really stood out, because I hadn't ever been in faith. And I'll read it for you from the Bible, just to sort of reiterate, so I don't sort of mess it up. But it's just something that I think has been really important, and it just sums up really, I'd say, my journey and my sort of vision, sort of my way into faith. And it's Luke 11, verse 9 to 10. And so I tell you, keep on asking, and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking, and you will find. Keep on knocking, and the door will be opened. For everyone who asks receives, and everyone who seeks finds, and to everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. And that's me. I was never in faith, and I asked for help, and He helped. I've asked since for doors to be open. How can I do more? And doors have opened. So I think if you're sat on the fence and not sure, just take that leap of faith. If you pardon the pun, just take that leap of faith and put that trust into Him, and your life will change. Because for me, it's changed, and it's not for the worse. It's so much more. It's so much for the better, and I just can't wait to sort of continue that journey, really.